working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus on tonight's headlines. The Philippines is expected to remain the fastest growing economy in the ASEAN nations despite an anticipated slowdown over the next 2 years, according to the regional banking giant Maybank. Thousands of Palestinians left Gaza to escape the violence and bombardment, while Israel declared it was strengthening its stranglehold on Hamas and once more rejected a ceasefire that did not include the release of hostages. Our world is currently at a crossroads, teetering on the edge of a precipice. The ongoing wars in Ukraine and Gaza, coupled with the simmering tensions in Taiwan and the South China Sea, have created a volatile atmosphere, one that could easily escalate into a global conflict. Singapore's Foreign Minister Vivian Balakrishnan aptly described the current situation as a moment of danger. And Taiwan closely monitored a Chinese naval formation led by the aircraft carrier Shandong as it sailed through the Taiwan Strait on Wednesday. The Philippines is expected to remain the fastest growing economy in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, despite an anticipated slowdown over the next 2 years, according to regional banking giant Maybank. Maybank projects that the Philippines' gross domestic product growth may slow to 5.2% this year before rebounding to 6.5% next year. While the growth rate is expected to moderate, the Philippines is still poised to outperform its ASEAN counterparts, with economic growth expected to average 4% this year and 4.7% in 2024. This year's growth projection for the Philippines is higher than Indonesia's 5%, Vietnam's 4.8%, Malaysia's 4.4%, Thailand's 2.9%, and Singapore's 0.8%. The Philippine economy grew by 5.3% in the first half of the year, slightly below the government's 6 to 7% target. The slowdown was attributed to a moderation in the second quarter, which saw growth dip to 4.3% from 6.4% in the first quarter. For 2024, the Philippines' GDP expansion is projected to outpace Vietnam's 6%, Indonesia's 5.2%, Malaysia's 4.4%, Thailand's 3.6%, and Singapore's 2.2%. Thousands of Palestinians left Gaza to escape the violence and bombardment, while Israel declared it was strengthening its stranglehold on Hamas and once more rejected a ceasefire that did not include the release of hostages. As fighting broke out between Israeli troops and the armed branch of Hamas, the Ezzedin Al-Qassam brigades, the Israeli army said that 50,000 residents had fled North Gaza for the southern portion of the small coastal strip.
احنا طلعنا من هناك من شدة القصف ومن شدة الضرب. احنا لنا صامدين 32 يوم 33 يوم. امبارح قررنا نطلع لانه القصف امبارح كان كثير جامد. الاولاد خايفين، الستات خايفين، احنا مش قادرين. الله يكون بالعون.
According to a source close to Hamas, negotiations are taking place to exchange a 3-day ceasefire in Gaza for the release of 12 captives, including 6 Americans who are being held by the Islamists. Prior to this, a different source who was briefed on the discussions claimed that Qatar was mediating talks to release 15 hostages in exchange for a 1 to 2 day ceasefire in collaboration with the U.S. Nonetheless, in the midst of reports of talks for a short-term truce with Hamas to permit the entry of humanitarian aid, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu once more dismissed the idea of a ceasefire in Gaza.
אני מבקש לשים בצד כל מיני שמועות סרק שאנחנו שומעים מכל מיני כיוונים ולחזור על דבר אחד ברור. לא תהיה הפסקת אש בלי שחרור חטופינו. כל השאר סרק.
Meanwhile, Volker Turk, the High Commissioner for Human Rights stated in Cairo today that he had seen the gates to a living nightmare at the Rafah crossing in Egypt.
As my spokesperson has just said, I've just returned from Rafah, from the crossing, which is a symbolic lifeline for the last month for the 2.3 million people in Gaza. The lifeline has been unjustly, outrageously thin. In Rafah, I witnessed the gates to a living nightmare. A nightmare where people have been suffocating under persistent bombardment, mourning their families, struggling for water, for food, for electricity and fuel. My colleagues are among those trapped and among those who have lost family members, suffering sleepless nights filled with anguish, despair and agony.
Although they refrained from demanding a truce, G7 foreign ministers stated that they were in favor of humanitarian pauses and corridors in the Israel-Hamas conflict.
The G7 members agreed on the following points. 1. We resolutely condemn the terrorist attacks by Hamas and other groups. 2. We seek immediate release of hostages. 3. Emergency actions are needed to respond to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Thus, unhindered humanitarian assistance must be enabled to secure food, water, healthcare, fuel, shelter, and access by humanitarian workers. We will support humanitarian pause and humanitarian corridor to facilitate humanitarian assistance. 4. We stress the importance of compliance with international law, especially with international humanitarian law. 5. Further escalation of the conflict or its expansion into larger areas must be prevented. 6. Engaging in sustainable long-term solution of Gaza and in the two-state solution is the only pathway to just and lasting peace.
The G7 ministers reaffirmed our staunch support for Israel's right and obligation to defend itself and seek to ensure the attacks of October 7th can never happen again in accordance with international humanitarian law. But as I discussed with my G7 colleagues, those calling for an immediate ceasefire have an obligation to explain how to address the unacceptable result it would likely bring about. Hamas left in place with more than 200 hostages with the capacity and stated intent to repeat October 7th again and again and again. Ultimately, the only way to ensure that this crisis never happens again is to begin setting the conditions for durable peace and security and to frame our diplomatic efforts now with that in mind. We must also work on the affirmative elements to get to a sustained peace. These must include the Palestinian people's voices and aspirations at the center of post-crisis governance in Gaza. It must include Palestinian-led governance and Gaza unified with the West Bank under the Palestinian Authority. And it must include a sustained mechanism for reconstruction in Gaza and a pathway to Israelis and Palestinians living side by side in states of their own with equal measures of security, freedom, opportunity, and dignity.
Although conceding that a transition period could be required after Israel's assault against Hamas militants in the Palestinian enclave, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken cautioned Israel against reoccupying Gaza. Blinken reiterated American support for Israel's attempts to drive out Hamas during a press conference on the fringes of a Group of Seven summit in Tokyo, but Blinken also said it is clear that Israel cannot occupy Gaza.
The United States believes key elements should include no forcible displacement of Palestinians from Gaza. Not now, not after the war. No use of Gaza as a platform for terrorism or other violent attacks. No reoccupation of Gaza after the conflict ends. No attempt to blockade or besiege Gaza. No reduction in the territory of Gaza.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stated in an interview with ABC News that his nation will provide security to Gaza after the fight is over for an indefinite period of time. Meanwhile, Omer Nutre's parents, who hold dual citizenship with the U.S. and Israel, are depending on President Joe Biden to rescue their son, who is reportedly among the hundreds of hostages taken prisoner by Hamas during their assault from Gaza earlier this month. Since October 7, when their ordeal and the other hostage families' ordeal began, they have not heard from him. Orna claims that neither she nor the other captive families are aware of the whereabouts of their loved ones, whether they are receiving food or medical attention, and that they are unaware of Hamas's motivation for the attack.
You know, and I want to say, Omer grew up here. He's very American. He went there for the right reasons. You know, he felt that he wanted to protect. He's not the kind of guy that was looking for a war. No one looks for a war, you know. And it's just crazy. This is unimaginable, right? And this has become our reality, you know. This month feels like 3 months, and then again it feels like yesterday. It's just crazy.
We live the kind of kid, happy kid, social kid, sports and fun that he is, that really goes well with his age, 22 years old. It just doesn't make sense that everything was put on hold like this, and the uncertainty that we live and the 240 other families live, simply unbearable. How come the Red Cross is not let in?
What do they want?
Got really concerned, so I texted Omer and I said, Omer, what's going on? What's going on? But there was no reply. We were hoping that, you know, maybe he's involved in some kind of action, trying to stop it. But we started to call people we know, and unofficially we were informed, probably by lunchtime, that his tank and the team on the tank were taken hostage. That was the assumption at the time. We were 14 families at the time, and President Biden was kind enough to have us on a Zoom call, and it was a very emotional call. Originally we were told that he's going to give us 10-15 minutes. He spent over an hour with us, and during this time he listened to our stories. He showed compassion and concern and really expressed his full commitment and his administration full commitment to bring this issue to a resolution.
Meanwhile, U.S. State Department spokesman Vedant Patel said they have been searching for the whereabouts of the hostages nonstop.
I will just reiterate that we have been working around the clock to determine the whereabouts of these hostages. We're working with the Israeli government on every aspect of this, including sharing intelligence, experts, offering our insight. As you also know, Deputy Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs Steve Gillen remains in Israel, and we are working extensively with our Israeli partners on this. Of course, we would welcome any news on the release of hostages, but is interested in releasing any of these hostages, they should do so. If they're saying that they have an interest in doing so, they should do so. The proof should be in the actions that they undertake. And so if they have a desire to release hostages, we would welcome that.
Our world is currently at a crossroads, teetering on the edge of a precipice. The ongoing wars in Ukraine and Gaza, coupled with the simmering tensions in Taiwan and the South China Sea, have created a volatile atmosphere, one that could easily escalate into a global conflict. Singapore's Foreign Minister Vivian Balakrishnan aptly described the current situation as a moment of danger. He warned of the potential for an accidental spark that could ignite a wider conflict, emphasizing the interconnectedness of these geopolitical flashpoints. Take a look.
Right now, you have a hot war in Europe, Ukraine. You already have a war in Gaza. The problem is whether you're going to get a regional conflagration. And I know you put him on the spot with the question about oil price. Well, the real issue is that if you have a regional conflagration, and in particular, Iran gets into the act, I think you can easily imagine the impact of this on global oil supplies and therefore the price, and the impact on all the rest of us. There's one more sub-factor which is worth remembering. The difference between 1973 and 2023 is that the United States is now an energy exporter, net, which is very different from the situation in 1973. And you need to pass the implications of that. Now, going beyond the Middle East, you will now have a world stage, hot war in Europe, war in the Middle East with possible conflagration, and you've got tripwires in the Pacific, Taiwan and South China Sea. And if you tot up on a ledger, the countries align on either side of these conflicts or tripwires all around the world, I'm very uncomfortable that it's the same cast of characters on either side of those lines. And therefore, you know, I don't want to be excessively alarmist, but the last time that happened globally was the First World War. So this is a moment of danger. I wouldn't say it's highly likely. It's less likely, but the probability is not zero, and it's got profound implications on peace and prosperity.
Amidst rising tensions in the region, Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong downplayed the likelihood of an immediate conflict over Taiwan. Lee expressed confidence that China is not, quote, trigger happy about taking over the self-governing island, which Beijing has long considered its own territory. His comments offered a glimmer of hope amidst the escalating tensions between China and the U.S. over Taiwan.
I don't think the Chinese would ever have thought lightly about going into Taiwan. They must surely know, and they have soldiers and sailors and airmen who will advise them that an amphibious attacking Taiwan is not like doing Iwo Jima, and Iwo Jima was bloody enough. So I'm sure they must make their calculations, but I don't believe that they are trigger happy. They have a problem. They would like Taiwan to be part of one China, but how to get from here to there? And I believe if they are not provoked, if events don't spin out of control, I don't believe that you're going to wake up one day and find that they've decided to launch D-Day.
Southeast Asian nations have expressed growing concern over the prospect of a conflict between the U.S. and China. They fear that such a conflict could disrupt critical supply chains and destabilize the region. Leaders in the region have urged both sides to exercise restraint and avoid actions that could escalate tensions.
That's another possible flashpoint, because four ASEAN countries have claims in the South China Sea which overlap with Chinese claims. Philippines, Brunei, Malaysia, Vietnam. All of them want to work some arrangement out between themselves in the first place, and with China mostest, because China is really the biggest claimant and most muscular. But at the same time, all of them have got other stakes with China. They are trading with China. China is their biggest trading partner, I think, for all of them. And therefore, this is not, the South China Sea is important, but it is not the only thing at stake. And I do not believe that any of them really, truly want to push it over the brink.
But nobody ever does on the whole. Putin
nobody ever does on the whole, but I would say that in the case of the Southeast Asian countries, their awareness of what the Soviets used to call the correlation of forces.
Yes.
In other words, who's on your side and who is on my side and whose battalions are bigger. I think there's a very healthy sense of realism, and therefore some restraints will be there. And even the Filipinos, I mean, the Americans are their treaty ally, but are you sure you want to get into a fight where you will be the battleground.
China has expressed a willingness to improve ties with the U.S., setting the stage for a potential meeting between Chinese President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Joe Biden.
More recently, as agreed by the two sides, China and the United States have had more important high-level interactions. These interactions have sent out positive signals and raised the expectations of the international community on the improvement of China-US relations. We're ready to strengthen communication and dialogue with the United States at all levels, advance mutually beneficial cooperation, properly manage differences, and jointly address global challenges.
The two leaders are expected to meet on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco next week. This would be their first face-to-face encounter since November 2022. The potential meeting comes amid a flurry of high-level exchanges between the two countries in recent months. Washington has sent several cabinet officials to Beijing, including Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, Climate Envoy John Kerry, and Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo. U.S. President Biden has said he expects to meet Chinese leader Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the summit in San Francisco next week for constructive talks. Taiwan closely monitored a Chinese naval formation led by the aircraft carrier Shandong as it sailed through Taiwan Strait on Wednesday. The carrier entered the strait that separates the island and mainland China on Wednesday afternoon and then continued sailing northward through the northern waters on Thursday morning. Taiwan's military is closely monitoring the situation and has deployed appropriate forces to respond. Now, this is the latest in a series of Chinese military exercises near Taiwan in recent months. China considers the self-ruled island its territory and has vowed to seize it one day by force if necessary. The Shandong's latest passage through the Taiwan Strait came after China said its troops were on constant high alert after U.S. and Canadian warships transited through the sensitive waterway last week. Now, according to John Waldron, President and Chief Operating Officer of Goldman Sachs Group, Incorporated, the single largest threat to the forecast for the world economy is still inflation. Let's listen in. A series of earthquakes struck Indonesia's Banda Sea on Wednesday, causing no immediate reports of damage or casualties. The U.S. Geological Survey confirmed that a 6.7 magnitude earthquake occurred at 8:02 p.m. local time, hours after an earlier 7.1 magnitude tremor struck the region. Now, both earthquakes were shallow and located far from the coast, posing no tsunami threat. Indonesia's frequent earthquakes are attributed to its location along the Pacific Ring of Fire, a seismically active arc that stretches from Japan through Southeast Asia and across the Pacific Basin. Hungarian President Katalin Novak arrived in Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea for a bilateral meeting with Prime Minister James Marape. Novak was greeted with a 21-gun salute and a traditional welcome ceremony. Ecor Telesa Quinola reports from Port Moresby.
Prime Minister James Marape and President Katalin Novak of Hungary meet at Nature Park in the capital city. Novak offers 50 educational scholarships to Papua New Guinea students at various tertiary institutes in Hungary.
We have to base our bilateral relationship on this mutual respect, which we lack so often in our international relationships. And just as I told you, we don't have many natural resources that you do have, but what we have is education. We have a quite high-level education in Hungary. And I know that for you, it is very precious that you give access to education to the younger generations.
Marape matches the scholarship offer with 50 students sourced from the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics Government National School Programs of Excellence.
We, through European Union facility, we built Wewak Hospital, we did retire Goroko Hospital and other hospitals that are on foot. We're accessing that from European Union facilities. Her chairmanship in European Union next year would be an important pointer to continue point Europe to existence of Papua New Guinea in the middle of the Indo-Pacific focus.
Marape gives Novak a tour of the park where the Hungarian president cuddles a rescued baby wallaby. President Novak and her team then flies to Manus for a provincial visit to explore the beauty of its coral reefs, pristine rivers, and relaxing environment. Novak says she will advocate further Papua New Guinea when she assumes chairmanship of the European Union in 2024.
From Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea, Eko Hortaleza Quinola, Eagle News, we live in extraordinary times.
In Singapore, Prince William, the Prince of Wales, traveled there without his wife, Kate Middleton, to attend the Earthshot Prize Awards ceremony. The ceremony showcased innovative solutions to the planet's most pressing environmental challenges. The event was attended by celebrities such as actress Kate Blanchett, Ted Lasso, star Hannah Waddingham, and Emmy Award-winning actor and producer Sterling K. Brown. These stars joined William in honoring the next wave of environmentalists and businesses that are working to address environmental issues. This year's Earthshot Prize received a record number of nominations with over 1,100 entries. The selection process resulted in 5 winners, each receiving a $1.2 million prize to support their work.
Of course, they're wanting to showcase globally the innovation that's happening, including in this part of the world. They work also very hard to offset the impacts of these events as we go. But I think it's about acknowledging that in all walks of life, whether you're in the private sector or a group like Earthshot, we have to constantly be looking about how we can reduce down the impact, our footprint, while still showcasing the innovation that we are today.
I think all of us in our daily lives and in our working lives can try and make improvements, but that's what's so great about something like today. You know, it's hopefully going to be really inspiring, and will hopefully give everyone, no matter what your job is, like ideas as to how you can try and make positive improvements.
It's just really hopeful. It can be really lonely to do this work, and it makes you feel supported and lifted up.
Yeah.
What will £1 million prize money mean?
It's 1 million trees, 1 million hope, 1 million of solutions, many things. And the other thing is a main tool to open more doors.
We want to reach more and more farmers, we want to reach more villages, we want to save more food from getting wasted. So we're expanding geographies, we're expanding product lines, and we are expanding to other lives.
Prince William has been a vocal advocate for environmental protection for many years. The Earthshot Prize is a reflection of his commitment to finding innovative solutions to the world's most pressing environmental challenges. As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.